This court has been attempting, frankly, all day to get through the reading of jury instructions, to get to the point where the parties make their closing arguments, and ultimately to put this case in the jury's hands. It has been challenging. It has been met by resistance from Mr. Brooks. I would once again describe it as being stubbornly defiant.
When Judge Darrell calls Darrell Brooks Jr. stubbornly defiant, that's about as nice as it gets. What's going on, everyone? You're watching Everything Else Channel on YouTube, everythingelsechannel.com. If at any point in time you like this video, please smash that like button. Please subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications. There's also a button that appears down here. And please, guys, leave a comment down below. First and foremost, Happy New Year to you all. It is today, January 1st, 2024. It's like 7:30 a.m. And I'm so happy to be able to make videos here at Everything Else Channel on YouTube, everythingelsechannel.com. So when the judge calls Darrell Brooks Jr. stubbornly defiant, it makes you wonder. I mean, she could probably call him all sorts of things, but you know, the objections that he raises are beaten to a pulp. I mean, he just continuously raises the same objections: subject matter jurisdiction, where is the plaintiff, you know, he doesn't understand the charges, don't call him by his name, he's a third-party intervener, what's the nature and cause of the charge. I mean, it's just the same script over and over and over again. And it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop during the opening. It doesn't stop during the trial. It doesn't stop during the closing arguments, during the sentencing. It just keeps going and going and going. And the judge, honestly, I think this is probably one of the most, if not the most patient judge that I'm familiar with, and especially that I've seen in a highly televised, highly traumatic, highly enraging trial as this one was. But I got to tell you something. I mean, the reality of the matter is these comments of his were really used as a dilatory tactic, you know, to just prolong, you know, and sometimes they were used to sabotage the process. Sometimes they were used to try to goad people into arguments. Sometimes they were used to get him thrown out of the courtroom. Because again, some might say, well, you know, surely he didn't want to be thrown out of the courtroom, because a lot of times when that happened, you know, he would forfeit, you know, things that he could submit as evidence. He maybe wouldn't be able to question witnesses as much. Maybe ultimately it might be why he wasn't allowed to testify, because he forfeited it because of his conduct in the court. So a lot of people are like, kind of like, you know, last thing he wanted to do was get thrown out. But I actually think he wanted to get thrown out a lot because of the fact that he could then later raise the sort of idea of impropriety, you know, raise the idea that it wasn't a fair trial, raise the idea that there was maybe a double standard where maybe prosecution team could get away with certain questions, but he couldn't. Because in his mind, I think that he was really trying to play this victim card to no end. And he wanted to try to alter people's perceptions, not so much during the trial. This is a very, very deceitful, conniving individual who was well aware, because again, this happened, you know, this horrible crime took place in 2021. And in 2021, I mean, this guy lived, I mean, you know, his whole life seeing social media, seeing the internet, seeing TMZ, seeing World Star. He knows how this all works. And I think that even when Sue Opper tried, you know, reiterated a point, tried to hopefully get him to agree that maybe some of the victims could be obscured. In other words, like their identity could be obscured so that they could have some privacy. He said, no, this is a public trial, you know, let's keep it public, let him be seen. He honestly, and for that argument, Judge Darrell actually said he made a good argument, which again, I don't know that the judge needed to do that. And maybe that's why I gave her a 97%, not 100, but she's only human. And if he made a good argument, it's, you know, I mean, I personally would have preferred Judge Darrell not saying that was a very well-stated point. Just, you know, if you're going to rule for him, but don't say that it was a well-stated point. But, you know, again, she wanted to seem fair, and she was fair, and probably more than fair. But again, I just feel that, you know, his antics, his demeanor, and, you know, his whole agenda was to not just make the situation unbearable at the present time, but he knew that this trial was going to be watched. Dawn probably told him, Dr. Mary Edwards probably told him, his roommate probably told him, hey, your trial is like, all over YouTube. It's all over Instagram and TikTok, X, all of those. At the time it was Twitter, not X, but so he knew that it was being watched. And, I feel like he was maybe making a performance for posterity's sake. I feel like he was maybe making a performance, that was worthy of being watched 5, 10, 15, 20 years later. Because again, I think that he sees himself as a future Manson or Bundy or Ramirez, in the sense that maybe he's not going to be able to enrich himself from book deals or movies or whatever, but he's going to get interviewed. He's going to get fan mail. And I said fan mail, you heard me right. I know that's disgusting to think about, but these serial killers, they don't just have fans, they have people asking them to marry them. You look at Danny Rawling, the Gainesville Ripper. I went to University of Florida. This person, I was going to say something bad, killed 5 University of Florida college students in their dorms, in their apartments, I should say. And, after being found guilty and sent to death row, Sandra London, a writer who I think worked, she did like computer manuals. I don't know, like she wasn't a serial killer writer, but she actually dated a serial killer before, when she was in her teens. I think she was dating, I forget who, but she was dating like a young man that would become a serial killer. And then she became enamored with Danny Rawling. And so she started this like courtship, and, they had prison letters, and then she started writing for him, and she started putting out books, and she was on Donahue, and she was on a bunch of these shows, and she was professing, her love for him. And this was again in the 90s, and the internet was still like a very new thing. And so they were talking about this connection that they had, and people just couldn't wrap their heads around it. You look at the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, he would break into people's homes, whether they were young, old, male, female, rich, poor, it didn't matter. There was no rhyme or reason to his sort of MO, his modus operandi, but he just killed and enjoyed killing and raped and tortured. And he was just a horrible human being. And when he was apprehended, I believe in East Los Angeles, the people, they wanted to kill him. They wanted to basically have mob justice. The cops came in, they saved him. And but when he was tried and all of the horrible things he did came to light, there were like very beautiful women in the courtroom that were there to show him support, and that would send him all sorts of, racy letters and items in the mail. And again, people wanted to marry him, and it just makes you wonder, like, what kind of, and they looked like very beautiful women. They looked like, college educated, or, if not college educated, very hardworking, like moms or waitresses, accountants, bookkeepers, just well-to-do people, people that had a good life and were about good things and stood for something. And there they were, fawning over a serial killer. So again, I think that Darrell Brooks Jr., was aware that everything that he was doing, although being watched at the time, was going to be watched by countless individuals down the road all over social media. Because the one thing that I think is a given, and it's a sure thing, is that this is only going to get more intense. Social media is not going to subside. If anything, it's going to get more intense. And, we got the phones, the watches, we got the tablets, we got laptops, we got desktops, we've got, AirPods where you can talk to them and get pretty much everything. But eventually it's just going to get more and more intense. And he's going to be part of that in the realm of this trial. And, the appeal is boring to him, probably because the lawyers have taken over and the other trials. So this was basically his moment. This was his moment. And it was like, 16, 17, 18 days worth of moments, dozens upon dozens of hours of just nonsense. And, for the judge to sort of collectively call that stubbornly defiant, like I said, it's her being very, very nice, because I could think of a lot of things to call it. Stubbornly defiant would not be one of them. But what say you guys? What do you think? Should the judge have been harder? Did Darrell Brooks bank on the fact that this was going to be seen by countless people in the future? Was he trying to be as outrageous as possible in the efforts to gain a fan base in the future? A sick and demented fan base, but a fan base nonetheless.